For your string art design, you're going to start with this worksheet right here just to get the concept down in your head. You can use one pencil or you can get a bunch of colored pencils to make it a little prettier. Make sure they're sharp, nice sharp tips. You're also going to need a ruler. Here's how this works. When we do string art, you are basically connecting dots. So for example, I'm going to connect number 1 over to number 1 here. I'm going to use a ruler to create a straight line with my color pencil. I'm going to move on to connecting number 2 to number 2. Maybe I switch colors to create something pretty with this worksheet. It's up to you. And you continue like that around. Now, if you're sitting there going, why are we doing this? Here's the idea that I want you to get in your head. String that we're going to sew with here for the shouldn't curve. If you have a nice, straight, tight piece of thread, it's the same as a ruler line. So what you're doing is mimicking the concept of how we are going to move these lines around on this page when we get to the point of using string on the black paper. Notice how all these straight lines ultimately create a curve when you put them all together. That's one of the magical things about these projects. Continue doing all of them just to see how these work out. For the worksheet, you are just connecting the numbers 1 to 1, 2 to 2 as you create each of these designs. When you're done with this worksheet, set the color pencils aside, put those back. You don't need a ruler anymore either. You understand the concept of how we stagger these lines and they move incrementally to create these sort of curved shapes. You'll also notice that colors are overlapping. The same thing will happen with string and create an interesting effect. You're going to choose from the pile of worksheets, whichever one you want. I want to show you that they're all a little different. Every worksheet will show you an example of what the final product should look like. There's another one. When you look at these, the numbers are laid out for you, but each one is a little different. At the bottom of the worksheet, or I'll tell you what number, it also will reference down and up, as in pushing the needle down and pulling the needle up. This one's 1 and 1 means you're looking to pair up the number 1 and the number 1 to start your stitch. And just like on the worksheet, then you're going to move on 2, 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, etc. However, some of them are different. Some of them start with other numbers. So for example, this one indicates that you should start with a 1 and a 12. And it even gives you a little arrow here to help you find your starting point. So 1 and 12, now you need to know in your head how this works, that concept of moving incrementally with your line. So 1 to 12, but then I would switch and I'd move 2 to 11. If you're not confident in this, you could even draw it out on the worksheet first just to get a feel for it. So 1 to 12, 2 to 11, 3 to 10, and you get the idea how you would move around. And then you move on to the next section and you repeat. If you're not sure, just ask me. First step though, we need to punch the holes. It's a lot easier if all your holes are punched. So you'll have a nice heavy black paper. I like to just glue this on a little bit on the back side. We're going to take it off in the end, so don't go crazy with the glue. You just need a little dab here and there so it doesn't wiggle on you. You can use a needle or you can use a push pin, and you're going to go ahead and poke a hole at every dot. Make sure you poke cleanly and you're not tearing the paper. Sometimes I have to take my hand and put it behind where the hole is to support the paper so you're not tearing through. So I'm punching a couple holes and then I'll show you. Flipping over, you can see where I've started punching the holes through. That will make sure this design stays clean and neat. Select your color of string. It's really up to you. If you want to switch all the time, or if you want to string the whole way, these not rainbow, but these strings that change colors are fun. Don't take more than your arm can handle. So I tell students, you can't see me right now, but go ahead and take an arm length or a little more. That's about all your hand can manage is a string that's as long as your arm. If it's much longer, you're pulling and pulling and pulling thread. The needles sit on these little pieces of felt. If you're not using it, leave it poked into the felt. Otherwise, needles do have a tendency to roll around and get lost on the floor. You may keep track of it this way, and when you're done with it, push it through twice so it's like this. That keeps it secure in there at the end of the class period. To thread a needle, it's very common for people to lick the thread to push it through. It gathers the little loose fibers at the end. However, it was kind of gross in class. So here's my trick. We're gonna go ahead and take the thread and fold it into a loop. Make that loop as small as you can, and you've eliminated those little loose fibers. And then you can take that loop and push it through the eye of the needle. That's one trick I have for threading needles. I like to see what I'm working on, so I'm gonna go ahead and rip this page back off carefully. So that I can look at it while I'm sewing on my good piece of paper. This sheet gave me a recommendation to start down here with 1 and 12. If you prefer, if you need the numbers, you could have left it on the back and sewn with it on there and torn it off at the very end, or even just leave it. This is the front of my work. The tail end of my thread, I don't want it showing on the front, it needs to be on the back. So I'm starting here at number 1. I'm going to find that hole and push my needle up till I have just a little tail. Let's flip over. There's my little tail. I need to tape that down. Anytime you switch threads, anytime you start a new thread, you're going to want to tape the tail. Anytime you finish with a thread, you need to tape the tail. This is too big, jeez. So now my tail is secure. I'll back up, get myself oriented correctly. That is hole number 1. I'm sewing to hole number 12 down here. The reason I like to look at the front when I sew, I want to make sure my line is straight. Nice straight line. It's not loose, it's not wobbly like that. Don't pull so hard that you tear the paper. If that happens, we have to do a patch job. Now, some people would go back to this hole to do the next line. I recommend that you scoot to this hole right here. On the back side, you're gonna see what's gonna happen. I'm gonna waste way less thread and I'm gonna have way fewer tangles. Make sure it's secure. Look at the back side. I have one tiny stitch. That's nice. I'm not wasting so much thread. I don't have them tangling up all over the place. So I stitched over one hole, and now I know that my next hole back up here line again. Whenever you feel a knot starting, pause. Don't pull tighter. You want to loosen it until you can figure out what's wrong. Now that I've done one section, I choose to tie off rather than having a big old thing hanging here. This is also a good chance to make sure all my stitches are snug. It has to be nice and tight on the front side. If you have any wobbly loose things, you want to pick at it until you get it straightened out in nice tight straight lines. When you're satisfied, go ahead and tape it down. I finished one section, but now I need to get started on the next section that I want to work right here. Looking at the handout, I'm trying to move into that next trend. For me, it helps me to go back to that line drawing you did with your colored pencils and a ruler. So if I could turn my ruler as I connected each dot, it made that, but it's just like this. Okay, so now I need to move into this section. I'm gonna look at this, it's like a map. That was the hole I just did, and I made that stitch. This is my next hole. I'm looking for the next number 1. My would be this empty hole right there, but that's not where I'm going to be. I need to be right there where there's already so that I can this whole section. Again, picturing it with my ruler, it's going to be like this. Turns I make each stitch so that I fill in that section. So that's the hole I need to start with now.